The morning mist clung to the concrete barriers as Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez pressed herself against the cold surface, her rifle steady despite the chaos erupting around her. Behind her stretched the Blackwater Bridge, the only escape route for hundreds of trapped civilians. Ahead, through the gray dawn, she could see them coming wave after wave of enemy soldiers, advancing with the confidence of a force that had never been stopped. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. For 2 years, her fellow officers had whispered the same words. Too soft, too careful, too concerned with casualties to be effective infantry. They said she belonged behind a desk, analyzing reports rather than leading soldiers into battle. But as Emma adjusted her grip and watched the approaching army, she knew they had been wrong about everything. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the strongest convictions, and sometimes the person everyone overlooks becomes the one who saves them all. The mess hall at Forward Operating Base Riverside buzzed with the familiar sounds of morning routine. Steam rose from industrial coffee urns, while the clatter of metal trays and overlapping conversations filled the cavernous space. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez sat at a corner table, methodically eating her breakfast while reviewing intelligence reports on her tablet. At 26, she possessed the kind of analytical mind that could process complex battlefield data with remarkable clarity. But her reserved demeanor and slight build had earned her a reputation that followed her like a persistent shadow. "Look who's playing soldier again," muttered Captain Derek Mason as he passed her table with his squad. The comment drew snickers from his companions, a sound that had become as routine as revealed for Emma. Mason commanded Bravo Company with the kind of aggressive leadership style that the infantry prized above all else. He was built like a linebacker, spoke in sharp commands, and had earned his reputation through 2 deployments where his unit's kill count had impressed senior leadership. In the hierarchy of respect that governed military culture, Mason represented everything. Emma was not. Emma continued reading without acknowledging the jab. The intelligence report detailed insurgent movement patterns in the Kestrel Valley, information that could prevent ambush if properly analyzed. She had spent the previous evening correlating enemy activity with civilian evacuation schedules, identifying potential safe corridors and vulnerability windows. It was meticulous work that had already saved lives in her sector, but it was also the kind of careful planning that reinforced her image as someone better suited for staff work than combat leadership. Colonel Patricia Stevens entered the mess hall with the measured stride of someone accustomed to command. Stevens was old-school infantry, a career soldier who had risen through the ranks during an era when battlefield aggression was the primary measure of leadership effectiveness. Her graying hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her weathered face bore the kind of 1,000-yard stare that came from too many firefights. She commanded respect through presence alone, and her approval was the currency that determined career advancement in the regiment. "Rodriguez," Stevens said, settling into the chair across from Emma, "we need to discuss your performance evaluation." Emma set down her tablet and gave Stevens her full attention. The colonel had been her commanding officer for 6 months, and their relationship had been professionally cordial but personally distant. Stevens respected Emma's intelligence and organizational capabilities, but had never hidden her belief that Emma lacked the killer instinct necessary for infantry leadership. "What can I do for you, ma'am?" Emma asked, her voice carrying the crisp professionalism she had cultivated throughout her military career. Stevens pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table between them. "I've been reviewing your fitness reports from your previous assignments. Your tactical knowledge is exceptional. Your soldiers respect you, and your sector has the lowest casualty rate in the theater. But there's a pattern in the evaluations that concerns me." Emma opened the folder and began scanning the documents. Each evaluation praised her intelligence, planning abilities, and concern for soldier welfare. But they also contained subtle criticisms that had become increasingly familiar. Words like cautious, risk-averse, and lacking aggressive instincts appeared with disturbing frequency. "Ma'am, could you elaborate on your concerns?" Emma asked, though she suspected she already knew the direction of the conversation. Stevens leaned back in her chair. "Emma, you're an outstanding officer in many ways. Your soldiers would follow you anywhere, and your tactical planning is some of the best I've seen. But infantry leadership requires more than careful analysis. Sometimes you have to make split-second decisions that prioritize mission accomplishment over casualty avoidance." The criticism stung because Emma knew it reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of her approach to leadership. She had never been reluctant to accept risk when risk was necessary for mission success. Her low casualty rates weren't the result of excessive caution. They were the product of thorough preparation and intelligent tactical thinking. But explaining this distinction had proven futile throughout her career. "Ma'am, I understand the importance of decisive action," Emma replied carefully. "But I believe that good planning and thorough preparation can often achieve objectives with fewer losses." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Stevens said, her tone sharpening. "You're always looking for the careful solution, the approach. That minimizes risk. But infantry operations aren't academic exercises. Sometimes you have to be willing to accept casualties to achieve strategic objectives." Emma felt her jaw tighten. Stevens was questioning not just her tactical judgment, but her fundamental fitness for infantry service. The implication was clear. Emma's concern for soldier welfare was evidence of weakness rather than strength. A character flaw that made her unsuitable for combat leadership. "Ma'am, with respect, I've completed every mission assigned to me," Emma said. "My sector has prevented 3 major insurgent attacks in the past 4 months, and my intelligence analysis has contributed to successful operations throughout the region. All of which would be more impressive if you'd done it from the front lines instead of from behind a desk," Stevens replied. "Emma, you're brilliant at analysis and planning, but analysis and planning don't win wars. Aggressive leadership does, warriors do." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Jake Thompson, Emma's platoon sergeant and one of the few people at the base who treated her as an equal rather than a curiosity. Thompson was a career NCO with 12 years of experience and a reputation for brutal honesty. His assessment of officer competence was considered gospel among the enlisted ranks, and his respect was harder to earn than any formal commendation. "Ma'am," Thompson said to Stevens, "sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation developing in Sector 7 that requires Lieutenant Rodriguez's immediate attention." Stevens nodded dismissively. "Of course. Another intelligence crisis that requires her special expertise." She gathered her papers and stood. "Emma, think about what we've discussed. You have all the tools to be an exceptional infantry officer, but you need to decide whether you want to lead from the front or coordinate from the rear." After Stevens left, Thompson settled into her vacated chair. His expression was unreadable, but Emma could sense the frustration radiating from him like heat from a forge. "Rough conversation?" Thompson asked. "The usual performance counseling session," Emma replied. "Apparently, my concern for keeping soldiers alive is evidence that I'm not cut out for infantry leadership," Thompson snorted. "Ma'am, I've served under 8 different platoon leaders during my career. Half of them were warriors who got good soldiers killed through stupid decisions. The other half were thinkers who kept us alive while accomplishing the mission. Guess which type one prefer?" Emma appreciated Thompson's loyalty, but she knew that his opinion carried limited weight in the broader assessment of her career prospects. The military institution valued certain types of leadership over others, and thoughtful planning was consistently ranked below aggressive action in the informal hierarchy of respect. "What's the situation in Sector 7?" Emma asked, changing the subject to something more immediately actionable. Thompson pulled out his own tablet and displayed A tactical map marked with recent insurgent activity. We've got increased movement around the village of Cedar Falls. Local sources report that insurgent forces are planning something big, possibly targeting the civilian population to draw us into a response. Emma studied the map with the kind of focused attention that had made her reputation. Cedar Falls was strategically positioned at the intersection of three major supply routes, making it valuable both as a logistics hub and as a potential trap for military forces. The village was home to approximately 800 civilians who had remained despite the ongoing conflict, relying on American protection for their safety. "What kind of intelligence do we have about insurgent capabilities?" Emma asked. "Sketchy," Thompson replied. "Local sources suggest a coordinated force of unknown size, probably well-armed and professionally trained. They've been moving equipment into the area for the past week, but our surveillance hasn't been able to get clear intelligence on their numbers or intentions." Emma began mental calculations based on the terrain features and known insurgent tactics. Cedar Falls was surrounded by hills that provided excellent observation and fields of fire for defensive operations. Any attempt to reinforce the village would require movement through predictable approach routes that could easily be turned into kill zones. It was exactly the kind of tactical puzzle that Emma excelled at solving, but also the kind of situation that her superiors believed required aggressive rather than analytical leadership. "Sergeant, what's the current garrison strength at Cedar Falls?" she asked. "One squad, 12 soldiers, positioned at the school building in the center of town. They've got good communications and adequate supplies, but they're not equipped for sustained combat against a significant force." Emma nodded, already formulating potential responses to various threat scenarios. The isolated squad could be easily overwhelmed if insurgent forces were as substantial as intelligence suggested, but any rescue operation would face the same tactical challenges that made the village vulnerable in the first place. "Ma'am," Thompson said, his voice taking on the respectful but firm tone he used when delivering hard truths to officers, "I need to tell you something about the mood in the platoon." Emma looked up from the map. Thompson's expression had shifted to something more serious, the kind of gravity that preceded important revelations about unit morale or operational effectiveness. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "The soldiers know about the evaluation comments," Thompson continued. "They know that command considers you too soft for infantry work, and they're not happy about it." Emma felt a flush of embarrassment. Military gossip traveled faster than radio communications, and she should have expected that her performance evaluations would become common knowledge among the enlisted ranks. "What are they saying?" she asked. "They're saying that you're the only officer in this regiment who gives a damn about bringing them home alive," Thompson replied. "They're saying that you've prevented more casualties through good planning than all the aggressive leaders combined. And they're saying that if command transfers you to a staff position, they'll request transfers themselves." The revelation was both gratifying and troubling. Emma appreciated the loyalty of her soldiers, but she also knew that their support could be interpreted as evidence that she was too close to the enlisted ranks, another mark against her fitness for senior leadership. "Sergeant, I appreciate their confidence, but soldier preferences aren't going to influence personnel decisions at the regimental level," Emma said. "Maybe not," Thompson replied, "but their combat effectiveness will. And ma'am, with respect, this platoon performs better under your leadership than any unit I've served with. We complete missions, we avoid casualties, and we maintain excellent relationships with the local population. That's not an accident, that's leadership." Emma considered Thompson's words as she studied the tactical situation around Cedar Falls. The village represented exactly the kind of challenge that her superiors believed required aggressive leadership, complex threat in difficult terrain with significant risk to both military personnel and civilian populations. It was also the kind of situation where her analytical approach could prove its value if she were given the opportunity to implement her preferred tactics. "Sergeant, if you were planning an operation to reinforce Cedar Falls, what would be your primary concerns?" Emma asked. Thompson leaned over the map and began pointing out terrain features. "Ma'am, the main road is obvious and easily interdicted. The hill positions here and here provide excellent overwatch for anyone wanting to ambush a convoy. And the bridge approaches are natural choke points that could turn into killing fields." Emma nodded, following Thompson's analysis. His assessment matched her own tactical evaluation, confirming that any conventional reinforcement operation would face substantial risks. But conventional thinking wasn't the only option available, and Emma had built her reputation on finding alternative solutions to supposedly intractable problems. "What about unconventional approaches?" she asked. "Routes that avoid the obvious choke points?" Thompson studied the map more carefully. "There's an old logging road that runs through the forest here," he said, tracing a barely visible line on the topographical display. "It's narrow and rough, probably not suitable for standard vehicles, but it might accommodate foot patrols or light vehicles." Emma examined the logging road more closely. It represented exactly the kind of alternative thinking that she specialized in, a solution that avoided enemy strengths while exploiting their assumptions about American tactical approaches. But it was also the kind of unconventional planning that her superiors viewed with suspicion. "Sergeant, how familiar are you with that route?" she asked. "I've patrolled it twice, ma'am. It's challenging terrain, but definitely passable for motivated infantry. The main advantage is that it approaches Cedar Falls from the north, where insurgent forces are least likely to have established blocking positions." Emma felt the familiar excitement that came with solving complex tactical problems. The logging road offered a potential solution to the Cedar Falls situation, but implementing it would require the kind of independent thinking that Colonel Stevens had specifically criticized in their morning conversation. As if summoned by her thoughts, Stevens reappeared at their table with an expression that suggested urgent developments. "Rodriguez," Stevens said without preamble, "we've just received intelligence that Cedar Falls is under imminent threat. I need you to prepare contingency plans for reinforcement operations." Emma looked up from the map where she and Thompson had been analyzing alternative approaches. "Ma'am, what's the timeline for threat materialization?" "Unknown, but potentially within the next 24 hours, Stevens replied. "I want multiple options prepared by this afternoon. Standard reinforcement protocols, equipment requirements, and casualty estimates." Emma felt a familiar frustration as Stevens outlined the planning requirements. The colonel was asking for exactly the kind of conventional analysis that had repeatedly proven inadequate for complex tactical situations. But she was also being given an opportunity to demonstrate her planning capabilities in a high-stakes environment. "Ma'am, I'll have comprehensive plans ready by 1500 hours, Emma said. Stevens nodded and turned to leave, then paused as if remembering something important. "Rodriguez, I want plans that prioritize mission accomplishment. We can't let concern for casualties prevent us from protecting those civilians." The comment was clearly intended as guidance, but Emma heard it as a warning. Stevens was telling her not to let her supposedly excessive caution interfere with developing aggressive tactical options. It was exactly the kind of institutional pressure that had shaped her entire career, the expectation that good officers would prioritize mission accomplishment over soldier welfare, even when the two objectives were not mutually exclusive. After Stevens left, Emma and Thompson continued their tactical analysis in the relative privacy of the nearly empty mess hall. The morning crowd had dispersed to their various duties, leaving behind the quiet hum of kitchen operations and the distant sounds of base activity. "Ma'am," Thompson said, "what kind of plans do you think the colonel is expecting?" Emma considered the question carefully. Stevens wanted conventional reinforcement plans that demonstrated aggressive leadership and decisive action. She wanted casualty estimates that showed Emma was willing to accept losses in pursuit of strategic objectives. Most importantly, she wanted evidence that Emma could think like an infantry officer rather than a staff analyst. She wants plans that look like they were developed by someone who understands infantry operations, Emma replied. Direct approaches, overwhelming force, clear objectives. And what kind of plans do you think will actually work? Thompson asked. Emma smiled grimly. Plans that account for enemy capabilities, terrain limitations, and the probability that conventional approaches will walk into prepared ambush positions. For the next 3 hours, Emma and Thompson worked together to develop tactical plans that satisfied both requirements. They created conventional reinforcement options that followed established doctrine and demonstrated appropriate aggressiveness. But they also developed alternative approaches that exploited enemy assumptions and avoided predicted tactical traps. The work was intellectually stimulating in the way that complex problems always engaged Emma's analytical mind. But it was also professionally frustrating because she knew that the innovative solutions would likely be dismissed as evidence of her inability to think like a conventional infantry officer. As the afternoon briefing approached, Emma reflected on the morning's conversations and their implications for her career. Colonel Stevens had made it clear that Emma's approach to leadership was viewed as a professional limitation rather than a tactical advantage. The institution valued certain types of thinking over others, and Emma's methodical problem-solving was consistently ranked below aggressive action in the informal hierarchy of military effectiveness. But Emma also knew that her soldiers trusted her precisely because she refused to waste their lives through poor planning. Thompson's comments about platoon morale confirmed that her leadership style was effective where it mattered most, among the people who actually had to execute tactical operations under enemy fire. The question was whether institutional approval or practical effectiveness mattered more for mission accomplishment and soldier welfare. Emma had spent her entire career trying to balance both requirements, but the morning's events suggested that the balance was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. As she gathered her planning materials and prepared for the afternoon briefing, Emma wondered whether the Cedar Falls situation would provide an opportunity to demonstrate her tactical capabilities or simply confirm her superior's assessment that she was too gentle for infantry leadership. Either way, she was determined to develop plans that would bring her soldiers home alive, while accomplishing the mission objectives that protected civilian populations. It was the kind of leadership challenge she had trained for throughout her military career, even if the institution didn't always recognize the value of her approach. The briefing room at Forward Operating Base Riverside felt like a tribunal as Emma entered with her tactical folders. The afternoon sun streamed through bulletproof windows, casting harsh shadows across the conference table where Colonel Stevens sat flanked by Major Robert Hayes from Intelligence and Captain Derek Mason from Bravo Company. The atmosphere was thick with the kind of professional tension that preceded important operational decisions. Emma took her designated seat and spread out her planning materials, noting how the other officers positioned themselves. Hayes sat with the rigid posture of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room, his intelligence reports organized with military precision. Mason lounged back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone whose opinions were rarely questioned. Stevens presided over the group with the authority of someone whose approval could make or break careers. Rodriguez, Stevens began without preamble, walk us through your reinforcement options for Cedar Falls. Emma activated the digital display and brought up her first tactical presentation. She had spent considerable time crafting plans that would satisfy Stevens' expectations while maintaining her own professional standards. The result was a careful balance between conventional doctrine and practical innovation. Ma'am, I've developed 3 primary courses of action for reinforcing the garrison at Cedar Falls, Emma began. Option 1 involves a direct armored approach. Along Highway 47, utilizing overwhelming firepower to suppress potential ambush positions. Option 2 employs a helicopter insertion directly into the village center, bypassing ground-based threats entirely. Option 3 uses a coordinated ground movement along multiple approach routes to divide enemy attention and complicate their defensive planning. Major Hayes leaned forward, studying the tactical displays with professional interest. What are your casualty estimates for each option? Emma had anticipated this question and prepared conservative projections based on intelligence assessments and terrain analysis. Option 1 carries the highest risk due to predictable approach routes and excellent enemy observation positions. Estimated casualties range from 15 to 20% depending on enemy capabilities. Option 2 reduces transit risk but increases vulnerability during insertion and extraction phases. Option 3 distributes risk across multiple units, but requires more complex coordination. Captain Mason interrupted with obvious skepticism. Rodriguez, these projections seem overly conservative. Are you factoring in our technological superiority and firepower advantages? The question exposed exactly the kind of thinking that Emma had encountered throughout her career. Mason was viewing the tactical problem through the lens of American military doctrine, which emphasized technological advantages and firepower superiority over terrain analysis and enemy capabilities. It was the same approach that had led to numerous tactical disasters when enemy forces proved more adaptable than anticipated. Sir, I'm basing projections on enemy capabilities rather than our preferences, Emma replied carefully. Intelligence suggests we're facing professionally trained forces operating in terrain that favors defensive operations. Technological advantages are significant, but they don't eliminate tactical reality. Stevens made notes as Emma spoke, her expression unreadable. What's your recommended course of action? Emma had wrestled with this decision throughout her planning process. Her analytical assessment favored approaches that minimized risk while achieving mission objectives, but she knew that Stevens was expecting recommendations that demonstrated aggressive leadership thinking. Ma'am, I recommend a modified version of Option 3 that incorporates elements from my alternative planning analysis, Emma said. Rather than using conventional approach routes, we can utilize secondary roads and terrain features that avoid enemy strengths while exploiting their tactical assumptions. Hayes studied the alternative routes on Emma's display. These approach vectors are significantly more complex than standard doctrine suggests. What's your rationale for avoiding established tactical procedures? Emma felt the familiar challenge of explaining unconventional thinking to officers who valued doctrinal compliance over tactical innovation. Sir, enemy forces have had adequate time to prepare defensive positions along obvious approach routes. By utilizing unexpected vectors, we can achieve tactical surprise while reducing exposure to prepared ambush positions. Mason shook his head dismissively. Rodriguez, you're overthinking this situation. The enemy isn't some sophisticated military force, they're insurgents with limited capabilities and poor coordination. Direct action is more effective than elaborate tactical schemes. The comment revealed Mason's fundamental misunderstanding of the tactical situation and his institutional bias against complex planning. Emma had encountered this attitude repeatedly throughout her career, the assumption that careful analysis was evidence of timidity rather than professional competence. Sir, intelligence reports suggest enemy forces have demonstrated significant tactical sophistication in previous engagements, Emma replied. Underestimating their capabilities has proven costly in similar situations. Stevens interrupted the growing tension between Emma and Mason. Rodriguez, I want to hear about these alternative approaches you mentioned. What makes them superior to conventional doctrine? Emma shifted to her secondary planning materials, activating displays that showed terrain analysis and movement corridors that avoided obvious tactical approaches. She had developed these plans using the same analytical methods that had proven successful throughout her career, but she knew they would be viewed skeptically by officers who preferred straightforward solutions. "Ma'am, the alternative approaches utilize terrain features that enemy forces are unlikely to have prepared for. Defensive operations," Emma explained. "The old logging roads through the northern forest provide concealed movement corridors that approach Cedar Falls from unexpected directions. Additionally, the timing and coordination of multiple small unit movements can achieve tactical surprise, while maintaining operational security." Hayes examined the alternative routes with growing interest. Despite his institutional loyalty, he possessed enough tactical knowledge to recognize innovative thinking when it was presented professionally. "Rodriguez, how did you identify these movement corridors?" "They're not annotated on standard tactical maps." "Sir, I've conducted extensive terrain analysis using satellite imagery, local knowledge from previous patrols, and historical data about insurgent movement patterns," Emma replied. "The logging roads were identified through conversations with local civilians, who have intimate knowledge of the regional geography." Mason leaned back in his chair with obvious skepticism. "So your tactical plan depends on information from local sources who may or may not be reliable. That seems like an unnecessary risk when we have established procedures that have proven effective." Emma felt her frustration mounting as Mason dismissed local intelligence that could prove crucial for mission success. His attitude reflected the same institutional arrogance that had led to tactical failures throughout military history, the assumption that American doctrine was universally superior to local knowledge and enemy capabilities. "Sir, local intelligence has proven accurate in previous operations," Emma said. "Disregarding terrain knowledge from people who live in the area seems more risky than incorporating their insights into tactical planning." Stevens had been observing the exchange between Emma and Mason with obvious interest. As the senior officer present, her assessment of the discussion would influence how Emma's recommendations were received and implemented. "Rodriguez, I appreciate thorough planning, but I'm concerned about the complexity of your proposed alternatives," Stevens said. "Infantry operations require clear, simple plans that can be executed under pressure. Elaborate schemes tend to fall apart when contact with the enemy disrupts timing and coordination." The criticism struck at the heart of Emma's professional approach. Stevens was arguing that thoughtful planning was actually a liability in combat operations, that simplicity was inherently superior to analytical sophistication. It was exactly the kind of institutional thinking that had frustrated Emma throughout her career. "Ma'am, with respect, simplicity shouldn't come at the expense of tactical effectiveness," Emma replied. "Complex problems sometimes require sophisticated solutions, especially when conventional approaches play into enemy strengths." Hayes had been studying Emma's materials with obvious concentration. "Rodriguez, these alternative approaches are intriguing, but they raise significant coordination challenges. How do you plan to maintain communication and control across multiple dispersed units operating in difficult terrain?" Emma had anticipated coordination concerns and developed detailed communication plans that addressed the challenges Hayes had identified. "Sir, I've planned for redundant communication systems including satellite communications, radio relays, and pre-positioned liaison teams. Additionally, the movement plans include contingency procedures for maintaining operational tempo if communication systems are compromised." Mason interrupted with obvious impatience. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Rodriguez is turning a straightforward tactical problem into an elaborate engineering project. Sometimes the best solution is the most direct one, overwhelming firepower applied decisively." Emma recognized Mason's criticism as representative of broader institutional attitudes toward military planning. The preference for direct action over analytical thinking reflected cultural values that prioritized aggression over intelligence, decisive action over careful preparation, Sir, direct action is certainly an option, but it's not automatically the most effective option, Emma said. Tactical success depends on matching approaches to specific situations, rather than applying universal solutions, regardless of circumstances. Stevens made more notes as the discussion continued. Emma could sense that the colonel was evaluating not just her tactical recommendations, but her overall approach to military problem-solving. The conversation had become a test of Emma's fitness for infantry leadership as much as a planning session for Cedar Falls operations. Rodriguez, I want to understand your philosophical approach to infantry operations, Stevens said. How do you balance mission accomplishment with casualty avoidance? What happens when those objectives conflict? The question cut to the fundamental tension that had shaped Emma's entire career. Stevens was asking her to articulate her leadership philosophy in terms that would either validate or condemn her fitness for continued infantry service. Ma'am, I believe that mission accomplishment and casualty avoidance are usually complementary, rather than conflicting objectives, Emma replied. Thorough planning and tactical innovation can often achieve strategic goals while minimizing losses. When genuine conflicts arise, mission requirements take priority, but those situations are rarer than institutional culture suggests. Hayes nodded thoughtfully. That's an interesting perspective. Can you provide examples of how careful planning has achieved better results than direct action approaches? Emma felt a moment of professional satisfaction as Hayes requested specific evidence for her tactical philosophy. She had documented numerous examples throughout her career where analytical thinking had proven superior to conventional approaches. Sir, during my previous deployment, our sector faced repeated insurgent attacks along a critical supply route, Emma explained. Standard doctrine called for increased convoy security and reactive patrols, but analysis of attack patterns revealed that insurgents were exploiting predictable timing and routing. By varying convoy schedules and utilizing alternative routes identified through terrain analysis, we reduced attacks by 70% while maintaining supply operations. Mason looked skeptical. That sounds like you got lucky with enemy incompetence rather than demonstrating tactical superiority. Emma had expected this dismissal and prepared additional examples that demonstrated the consistent effectiveness of her analytical approach. Sir, during the same deployment, intelligence analysis identified insurgent leadership patterns that enabled targeted operations against high-value targets. Rather than conducting broad sweep operations that typically yielded minimal results, we used behavioral analysis to predict leadership movements and conducted precision operations that neutralized key enemy figures. Stevens had been taking detailed notes throughout Emma's explanation. Rodriguez, these examples suggest that your approach works well in permissive environments with adequate time for analysis and planning. How does your methodology apply to dynamic situations that require immediate tactical responses? The question addressed one of the most common criticisms of Emma's leadership style, the assumption that analytical thinking was incompatible with rapid decision-making under pressure. Emma had encountered this criticism repeatedly, despite evidence that her analytical skills actually enhanced her ability to process information quickly during crisis situations. Ma'am, analytical training improves rather than impedes rapid decision-making, Emma replied. Understanding terrain, enemy capabilities, and tactical principles enables faster recognition of opportunities and threats. Pattern recognition and systematic thinking actually accelerate rather than slow tactical responses. Hayes leaned forward with obvious interest. Can you elaborate on how analytical skills translate to combat effectiveness? The traditional view is that overthinking leads to paralysis under pressure. Emma appreciated Hayes' willingness to consider alternative perspectives on tactical thinking. His question provided an opportunity to explain how intellectual preparation enhanced rather than replaced instinctive combat responses. Sir, analytical preparation creates mental frameworks that organize information processing during high-stress situations. Emma explained. When contact occurs, trained analysis becomes automatic pattern recognition rather than conscious calculation. It's similar to how extensive training makes complex tactical movements instinctive rather than deliberate. Mason remained skeptical. Rodriguez, that's an interesting theory, but combat isn't an academic exercise. When bullets are flying and soldiers are dying, you need gut instincts and aggressive leadership, not theoretical frameworks. Emma recognized Mason's criticism as reflecting broader cultural attitudes within the infantry community. The preference for instinctive over analytical responses represented institutional values that had shaped military culture for generations. Sir, I don't disagree that combat requires instinctive responses, Emma said. But I believe that training and analysis improve those instincts rather than replacing them. The best tactical decisions combine experience, training, and analytical preparation. Stevens closed her notebook and looked around the table. I think we've covered the essential issues. Rodriguez, I want you to refine your recommendations based on this discussion. Prepare final plans for implementation within the next 24 hours. Emma gathered her materials as the briefing concluded, noting the different expressions on her colleagues' faces. Hayes appeared thoughtful, perhaps reconsidering his assumptions about analytical approaches to tactical problems. Mason remained dismissive, clearly unconvinced that Emma's methods had value for infantry operations. Stevens maintained her professional neutrality, but Emma detected subtle skepticism about her tactical philosophy. As the other officers filed out of the briefing room, Emma remained behind to organize her planning materials and consider the implications of the afternoon's discussion. The conversation had revealed the depth of institutional resistance to her approach to military leadership. Despite demonstrated success in previous operations, her analytical methods were viewed with suspicion by colleagues who preferred more conventional approaches. The challenge was not simply developing effective tactical plans for Cedar Falls, but doing so in ways that satisfied institutional expectations while maintaining her professional integrity. Emma had spent her career navigating this tension, but the current situation presented particularly difficult choices between conformity and effectiveness. As she prepared to leave the briefing room, Emma reflected on the broader implications of the institutional attitudes she had encountered. The military's preference for aggressive leadership over analytical thinking wasn't simply a matter of personal preference, it represented systematic barriers to incorporating diverse perspectives and innovative solutions into tactical planning. The result was an institution that often failed to utilize the full range of available expertise, preferring familiar approaches over potentially superior alternatives. Emma's experience was symptomatic of larger problems that affected not just individual careers, but military effectiveness and soldier welfare. Walking back to her quarters through the dusty paths of forward operating base Riverside, Emma wondered whether the Cedar Falls operation would provide an opportunity to either demonstrate the value of her approach or simply confirm her superiors' assessment that she was unsuited for infantry leadership. Either way, she was determined to develop plans that would accomplish the mission while bringing her soldiers home alive. The encrypted communication from Cedar Falls arrived at 0430 hours, crackling through the radio static with the urgency that preceded disaster. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, manning the night watch in the communications center, immediately recognized the tension in Corporal Mitchell's voice as he transmitted from the village garrison. Base Command, this is Cedar Falls. We've got significant enemy movement in the surrounding hills. Multiple vehicles, coordinated positioning, and what appears to be heavy weapons emplacement. Request immediate reinforcement or extraction authorization. Emma had been awakened by the emergency protocols and arrived at the communication center within minutes. Her uniform hastily assembled, but her mind already processing the tactical implications of Mitchell's report. She found Gonzalez coordinating with the duty officer while monitoring multiple radio frequencies for additional intelligence. "Sergeant, what's the current status of our garrison?" Emma asked, moving to the tactical display that showed real-time positioning data from Cedar Falls. "Ma'am, 12 soldiers positioned at the school building. Adequate ammunition for sustained defense, but they're reporting enemy forces in positions that would prevent any conventional extraction," Gonzalez replied. Corporal Mitchell estimates enemy strength at company level, possibly reinforced. Emma studied the tactical display while considering the implications of Mitchell's intelligence report. A company-sized enemy force represented significantly greater capabilities than previous intelligence estimates had suggested. If accurate, the garrison at Cedar Falls was facing overwhelming odds in a defensive position that had never been designed for sustained combat operations. Colonel Stevens arrived at the communications center with the grim expression of someone who had been anticipating bad news. She was followed closely by Major Hayes, whose intelligence assessment had apparently failed to predict the current tactical situation, and Captain Mason, whose aggressive confidence had evaporated in the face of genuine crisis. "Rodriguez, what's your initial assessment?" Stevens asked without preamble. Emma continued studying the tactical display while formulating her response. The situation was developing exactly as her alternative intelligence analysis had predicted, but pointing out this vindication would be counterproductive during a crisis requiring immediate action. "Ma'am, if Corporal Mitchell's estimates are accurate, our garrison is facing a coordinated assault by professionally trained forces," Emma replied. "The enemy positioning suggests they've had adequate time to prepare defensive positions that would complicate any conventional rescue operation." Hayes leaned over the communications equipment to monitor additional radio traffic from the village. "Mitchell, this is Base Command. Can you provide more specific intelligence on enemy capabilities and positioning?" Mitchell's response carried the strain of someone operating under extreme pressure. "Base Command, enemy forces have established blocking positions on all major approach routes. We're observing heavy weapons emplacements, coordinated movement patterns, and what appears to be professional military equipment. This isn't the same type of insurgent activity we've encountered previously." Stevens turned to Emma with obvious concern. "Rodriguez, how quickly can you implement your reinforcement plans?" Emma felt a moment of professional vindication mixed with tactical anxiety. Her alternative approaches to the Cedar Falls situation were suddenly relevant, but implementing them under emergency conditions would be significantly more challenging than conducting deliberate operations with adequate preparation time. "Ma'am, the conventional approaches we discussed yesterday would be extremely hazardous given the current enemy disposition," Emma said carefully. "The alternative routes I identified would require more preparation time but offer better prospects for successful intervention." Mason interrupted with obvious frustration. "Rodriguez, we don't have time for elaborate planning schemes. Our soldiers are under fire and need immediate support." Emma recognized Mason's criticism as reflecting the same institutional bias that had shaped the previous day's planning discussions. The preference for immediate action over tactical sophistication was exactly the kind of thinking that created crisis situations requiring desperate improvisations. "Sir, immediate action that results in additional casualties won't help the garrison at Cedar Falls," Emma replied. "We need approaches that can actually succeed rather than simply demonstrate aggressive intentions." Stevens studied the tactical display while considering the available options. "Rodriguez, walk me through your alternative approaches. How quickly can they be implemented?" Emma moved to the digital mapping system and activated her previously prepared tactical plans. Despite the emergency conditions, her analytical preparation was proving valuable for rapid assessment of available options. "Ma'am, the northern approach through the logging roads could be implemented within 6 hours," Emma explained. The route avoids enemy observation positions and approaches Cedar Falls from directions they're unlikely to have fortified. Additionally, the terrain provides natural concealment for movement and positioning of support elements. Hayes had been monitoring additional intelligence reports while Emma presented her tactical options. Rodriguez, we're receiving information that suggests enemy forces have been planning this operation for weeks. Your assessment that they would target obvious approach routes appears to have been accurate. The admission carried significant implications for the credibility of Emma's tactical analysis, but it also meant that the current crisis had developed exactly as her intelligence assessment had predicted. The institutional preference for conventional approaches had led directly to the tactical situation they were now facing. Sir, that intelligence confirms that enemy forces have had adequate time to prepare comprehensive defensive plans, Emma said. Any rescue operation will need to account for coordinated resistance rather than opportunistic harassment. Stevens made rapid calculations while studying Emma's alternative tactical plans. Rodriguez, I'm authorizing implementation of your northern approach. You have operational command of the reinforcement mission. Emma felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with professional responsibility. For the first time in her career, she was being given command authority for a major combat operation during an active crisis. It was the opportunity she had trained for throughout her military service, but it was coming under the worst possible circumstances. Ma'am, I'll need authorization to utilize assets from multiple units, Emma said. The operation requires coordination between infantry, aviation, and logistics elements. Approved, Stevens replied immediately. You have priority access to all available resources. Just bring our people home. As Emma began implementing her tactical plans, she was acutely aware that the success or failure of the operation would determine not just the fate of the Cedar Falls garrison, but the future of her military career. The institutional skepticism about her capabilities meant that failure would confirm every criticism of her leadership style, while success might finally validate her analytical approach to tactical problems. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of coordinated preparation. As Emma's alternative tactical plans were translated into operational reality, the logging road approach required specialized equipment for movement through difficult terrain, communication systems that could maintain coordination across dispersed units, and contingency planning for multiple potential complications. Lieutenant Sarah Chun from the motor pool proved invaluable in modifying vehicles for off-road movement through forest terrain. Her mechanical expertise, combined with Emma's tactical requirements, produced transportation solutions that could navigate the narrow logging roads while carrying necessary combat equipment. Ma'am, we've modified 6 vehicles for the northern approach, Chun reported. They're not pretty, but they'll handle the terrain while maintaining tactical mobility. Emma appreciated Chun's practical approach to equipment modification. The lieutenant represented the kind of innovative thinking that Emma had encountered among junior officers who hadn't yet been shaped by institutional preferences for conventional solutions. Sergeant Thompson coordinated personnel selection for the reinforcement mission, choosing soldiers who possessed both combat experience and the flexibility necessary for unconventional operations. His knowledge of individual capabilities proved crucial for assembling teams that could execute Emma's tactical plans under challenging conditions. Ma'am, I've selected personnel who have experience with small unit operations in difficult terrain, Thompson reported. They understand that this mission requires adaptation rather than adherence to standard procedures. The coordination process revealed both the strengths and limitations of Emma's analytical approach to military operations. Her detailed planning provided frameworks for addressing complex tactical challenges, but implementation required the practical expertise of soldiers who understood how to translate theoretical plans into operational reality. As the reinforcement convoy prepared for departure, Emma conducted final coordination with aviation assets that would provide overwatch and emergency extraction capabilities. Captain Jennifer Walsh, the helicopter pilot assigned to support the operation, brought years of experience with unconventional missions in challenging environments. "Rodriguez, I've reviewed your flight plans and communication procedures," Walsh said. "The northern approach is definitely unconventional, but it offers better tactical options than the standard routes." Emma appreciated Walsh's professional assessment of the tactical situation. As an aviator, Walsh understood terrain and tactical considerations from perspectives that complemented Emma's ground-based analysis. The final intelligence briefing before departure confirmed that enemy forces had continued strengthening their positions around Cedar Falls. The conventional approach routes were now clearly unsuitable for rescue operations, while the alternative routes Emma had identified remained viable for tactical surprise. Enemy forces appear to have anticipated standard American tactical responses, Hayes reported. They've positioned their strongest defensive elements along approaches that doctrine would typically recommend. Emma felt a grim satisfaction that her intelligence analysis had proven accurate, but she also recognized that success would depend on flawless execution of plans that had never been tested under combat conditions. The theoretical superiority of her approach would be meaningless if operational realities prevented effective implementation. As the convoy departed forward operating base Riverside, Emma reflected on the institutional journey that had brought her to this moment. Years of being dismissed as too gentle for infantry operations had culminated in operational command of a mission that could validate or condemn her entire approach to military leadership. The northern route through the logging roads proved even more challenging than Emma's reconnaissance had suggested. The narrow, winding paths required constant navigation adjustments while maintaining tactical security against potential enemy observation. Vehicle modifications that had seemed adequate during preparation were tested to their limits by terrain that demanded mechanical reliability under extreme conditions. "All units, this is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted as the convoy navigated particularly difficult terrain. Maintain visual contact and be prepared for route adjustments based on ground conditions. The communication discipline that Emma had emphasized during planning proved crucial for maintaining coordination as the convoy adapted to changing tactical requirements. Her insistence on redundant communication systems and flexible planning enabled real-time adjustments without compromising operational security. Midway through the approach, Thompson reported contact with local civilians who provided additional intelligence about enemy dispositions around Cedar Falls. Their information confirmed Emma's assessment that conventional approaches would have resulted in coordinated ambushes, while the northern route remained undetected by enemy forces. "Ma'am, local sources report that enemy forces are concentrated along the southern and eastern approaches to the village," Thompson transmitted. "No significant presence detected along our current route." Emma felt professional satisfaction that her tactical analysis was proving accurate under operational conditions, but she also knew that the most challenging phase of the mission was still ahead. Reaching the outskirts of Cedar Falls undetected was only the first step in a complex operation that required coordination between the relief force and the besieged garrison. As the convoy approached its final coordination point, Emma could hear the distant sound of gunfire from the direction of Cedar Falls. The engagement had begun, and the tactical situation was developing according to enemy timelines rather than American preferences. The success of her alternative approach would be determined by how effectively her forces could disrupt enemy plans through unexpected tactical action. "All units, this is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted as they prepared for the final approach. "Enemy contact is imminent. Execute according to planned procedures and maintain communication discipline." The northern approach had succeeded in bringing Emma's relief force to within striking distance of Cedar Falls without detection, but the real test of her tactical planning was about to begin. the theoretical advantages of avoiding enemy strengths and exploiting their assumptions would now be measured against the practical realities of combat operations under extreme pressure. As Emma prepared to implement the assault phase of her tactical plan, she was acutely aware that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of the Cedar Falls garrison, but the future of analytical approaches to infantry operations within the institutional culture that had consistently undervalued her capabilities. The gathering storm that had been building throughout her career was about to break, and Emma Rodriguez was positioned at its center with the opportunity to prove that gentle did not mean weak, that careful did not mean timid, and that the officer everyone had underestimated might be exactly the leader the situation required. The first mortar round exploded 300 meters from Emma's position, sending dirt and debris cascading through the forest canopy as her convoy reached the final ridge overlooking Cedar Falls. Through her binoculars, she could see the tactical nightmare that had developed below. The school building where Corporal Mitchell's garrison was trapped sat in the center of a coordinated kill zone, surrounded by enemy positions that commanded every approach avenue. Overwatch 6, this is Cedar Falls Actual. Mitchell's voice crackled through the radio, strain evident despite his professional calm. We've got approximately 40 enemy fighters in prepared positions. They're using mortar, heavy machine guns, and what appears to be improvised explosive devices on all access routes. We can hold our current position, but any movement draws concentrated fire. Emma studied the tactical situation while processing Mitchell's intelligence report. The enemy had achieved what military theorists called tactical perfection, a coordinated defensive position that maximized their advantages while minimizing American capabilities. Any conventional rescue attempt would result in catastrophic casualties for both the relief force and the trapped garrison. Captain Walsh's helicopter circled at a safe distance, providing aerial observation of enemy dispositions that confirmed Emma's worst tactical fears. Overwatch 6, this is Angel 7. I count 6 distinct fighting positions with overlapping fields of fire. The enemy has positioned their heavy weapons to cover all standard approach routes. Additionally, I'm observing prepared fallback positions that suggest this is a deliberate tactical trap. Emma felt the familiar combination of analytical clarity and tactical dread that accompanied impossible military situations. Her relief force had successfully approached Cedar Falls undetected, but implementing a successful rescue operation would require decisions that went far beyond her authorized mission parameters. Angel 7, this is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted. Can you identify the enemy command structure? How are they coordinating their defensive operations? Walsh adjusted her observation pattern to focus on enemy leadership indicators. Overwatch 6. I'm observing a central command position approximately 500 meters north of the village. Multiple radio antennas and coordinated movement patterns suggest this is their tactical headquarters. Emma began rapid calculations based on the intelligence Walsh was providing. The enemy command position represented both an opportunity and a vulnerability in their otherwise sophisticated defensive plan. If that position could be neutralized, the coordinated defensive operation might collapse into individual fighting positions that could be defeated separately, but attacking the command position would require Emma to make tactical decisions that exceeded her mission authorization. Colonel Stevens had approved a rescue operation using alternative approach routes, not an expanded assault on enemy command infrastructure that would fundamentally alter the scope of military operations in the region. Ma'am, Thompson said, moving to Emma's position with his own assessment of the tactical situation. We've got a problem that goes beyond standard rescue protocols. Emma lowered her binoculars and studied Thompson's expression. His concern reflected the same tactical analysis that was driving her own decision-making process. The situation had developed beyond the parameters of any rehearsed response. requiring improvisations that would determine whether 12 American soldiers lived or died. "Talk to me, Sergeant," Emma said. Thompson activated his tablet and displayed the tactical overview he had compiled based on observations from multiple positions. "Ma'am, this isn't a rescue operation anymore. It's an assault on a prepared defensive position by forces that have been planning this engagement for weeks. Our authorization covers reinforcement and extraction, but what we actually need is a coordinated attack on superior enemy forces in advantageous terrain." Emma studied Thompson's tactical assessment while weighing the institutional and operational implications of his analysis. He was correct that the situation had evolved beyond their authorized mission parameters, but she also knew that requesting expanded authorization would consume time that the Cedar Falls garrison didn't have. "Sergeant, what are our tactical options within current authorization limits?" Emma asked. Thompson had anticipated this question and prepared alternative approaches that stayed within the technical boundaries of their rescue mission while addressing the tactical realities they faced. "Ma'am, we can attempt extraction under covering fire, but casualty estimates approach 70% for both the relief force and the garrison. Alternatively, we can establish a defensive perimeter and wait for additional authorization, but enemy forces will likely complete their assault on the school building before higher headquarters can respond." Emma absorbed Thompson's assessment while monitoring radio communications from Cedar Falls. Mitchell's reports were becoming increasingly urgent as enemy forces intensified their assault on the garrison's defensive position. "Overwatch 6, this is Cedar Falls, actually," Mitchell transmitted. "Enemy forces are preparing for the final assault. We're taking accurate fire from multiple positions, and our ammunition is running critically low. Request immediate extraction or reinforcement within the next 30 minutes. Emma felt the tactical situation crystallizing around a decision that would define not just the immediate operation, but her entire military career. She possessed the analytical capability to identify solutions that could save the Cedar Falls garrison, but implementing those solutions would require her to exceed authorized parameters and assume personal responsibility for expanding the military engagement. Lieutenant Chen approached Emma's position with additional intelligence that complicated the tactical calculus. "Ma'am, I've been monitoring enemy communications using our electronic warfare equipment. They're coordinating with additional forces that are moving to reinforce their current positions." Emma felt her tactical options narrowing as Chen provided intelligence about enemy reinforcements. The window for successful intervention was closing rapidly, and any delay would make rescue operations exponentially more difficult. "Lieutenant, what's the timeline for enemy reinforcement?" Emma asked. Chen consulted her electronic monitoring equipment and correlated enemy communications with movement indicators. "Ma'am, based on their radio traffic, I estimate 45 minutes before additional enemy forces arrive in sufficient strength to make our current tactical options impossible." Emma found herself facing the kind of decision that military leadership courses had prepared her for theoretically but never practically. She possessed superior tactical knowledge, operational capability, and strategic understanding of the situation, but lacked formal authorization to implement the actions necessary for mission success. The institutional culture that had consistently questioned her fitness for infantry leadership had also created decision-making structures that prevented rapid tactical adaptation during crisis situations. The very analytical capabilities that made her effective in complex operations were being negated by hierarchical systems that required authorization from officers who lacked her immediate tactical knowledge. "Ma'am," Walsh transmitted from her aerial observation position, "I'm seeing increased activity around the enemy command position. They appear to be coordinating final preparations for an assault on the school building." Emma realized that the tactical situation had reached what military theorists called the point of no return, the moment when hesitation becomes deadlier than action. When established procedures become obstacles to mission accomplishment, when individual leaders must choose between institutional compliance and operational effectiveness, she activated her radio and established communication with Forward Operating Base Riverside. Base Command, this is Overwatch 6. The tactical situation has developed beyond parameters of authorized rescue operations. Request permission to engage enemy command structure to facilitate extraction of Cedar Falls garrison. The response from Colonel Stevens carried the strain of someone struggling with institutional limitations during an operational crisis. Overwatch 6, stand by for authorization. We're coordinating with higher headquarters for expanded operational authority. Emma knew that coordination with higher headquarters would require time that the tactical situation wouldn't permit. The bureaucratic processes that ensured proper oversight during deliberate operations became liability during rapidly developing crises that demanded immediate tactical responses. Base Command, this is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted. Time limitations prevent extended coordination procedures. Cedar Falls garrison requires immediate intervention within the next 15 minutes or the situation will become irrecoverable. Stevens' response reflected the institutional paralysis that occurred when tactical requirements conflicted with administrative procedures. Overwatch 6, maintain the current position until authorization is received. Do not exceed approved. Mission parameters. Emma felt the familiar frustration of being constrained by institutional thinking that prioritized procedural compliance over tactical effectiveness. The same hierarchical culture that had questioned her aggressive capabilities was now preventing her from applying her analytical expertise to save American lives. Mitchell's voice crackled through the radio with increasing desperation. Overwatch 6, enemy forces are breaching our perimeter. We've got wounded and we're down to our last magazines. If you're going to help us, it needs to happen now. Emma studied the tactical display while weighing institutional consequences against operational necessities. She could maintain her current position and preserve her military career while watching 12 soldiers die, or she could exceed authorized parameters and risk court-martial proceedings to implement tactical solutions that her analysis indicated would succeed. Sergeant Thompson, Emma said, her voice carrying the quiet determination that had characterized her entire military career. I'm implementing immediate assault on enemy command positions to disrupt their coordination and create extraction opportunities for Cedar Falls garrison. Thompson's expression reflected both professional satisfaction and personal concern. Ma'am, that decision exceeds our current authorization. Are you prepared for the institutional consequences? Emma had considered the career implications of unauthorized tactical decisions throughout her military service, but the immediate situation clarified her priorities in ways that institutional advancement could not. Sergeant, sometimes doing the right thing and doing the authorized thing aren't the same. Good leaders know the difference. She activated her radio and began coordinating the assault operation that her tactical analysis indicated offered the best prospects for successful intervention. All units, this is Overwatch 6, were implementing immediate assault on enemy command structure at grid. Reference 245 by 389. Angel 7 will provide close air support while ground elements advance on designated objectives, Walsh acknowledged. From her aerial position with professional understanding of the tactical requirements. Overwatch 6, this is Angel 7. I understand the tactical necessity and I'm prepared to provide coordinated fire support. Enemy command position is clearly identified and vulnerable to precision engagement. Emma felt the weight of command. Responsibility settling around her as she prepared to implement tactical decisions that exceeded her formal authority. For the first time in her military career, she was operating as the kind of decisive combat leader that the institution claimed to value, but she was doing so in direct contradiction to the procedural constraints that the same institution had. established a Chun coordinated electronic warfare support for the assault operation, using her technical expertise to disrupt enemy communications at the critical moment when tactical coordination would determine battle outcomes. Ma'am, I can maintain electronic jamming of enemy frequencies for approximately 20 minutes. That should be sufficient to prevent coordinated defensive responses during your assault. Emma began the final tactical coordination that would either vindicate her analytical approach to infantry operations or end her military career in court-martial proceedings. The institutional culture that had consistently underestimated her capabilities had also created the operational constraints that she was now violating to save American lives. All units, this is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted as her forces prepared for assault operations. Execute planned tactical sequence in 3 minutes. Maintain communication discipline and adapt to developing tactical situations. As Emma prepared to implement the unauthorized assault that represented everything her military training had prepared her for, she reflected on the institutional journey that had brought her to this critical decision point. Years of being dismissed as too gentle for infantry operations had culminated in a moment when her analytical capabilities and tactical expertise were the only factors standing between success and catastrophic failure. The point of no return had been reached, and Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez was crossing it with the quiet determination that had defined her entire approach to military leadership. The next few minutes would determine whether the institution's assessment of her capabilities had been accurate, or whether they had fundamentally misunderstood what strength looked like when it was tested by impossible circumstances. The first phase of Emma's assault began with Captain Walsh's helicopter sweeping down through the morning mist, her rotors cutting through the air with deadly precision as she aligned her aircraft for the coordinated strike on the enemy command position. Emma watched from her concealed position as Walsh demonstrated the kind of tactical flying that turned helicopters into instruments of surgical destruction. Overwatch 6, this is Angel 7 commencing attack run on primary target, Walsh transmitted, her voice steady despite the complexity of the maneuver she was executing. Enemy command position is clearly identified and designated for immediate engagement. Emma observed through her tactical scope as Walsh's helicopter unleashed its ordnance with devastating accuracy. The enemy command post erupted in a series of explosions that sent communications equipment and personnel flying across the hillside. Immediately, the coordinated defensive fire that had been systematically targeting the Cedar Falls garrison began to falter as individual fighting positions lost their tactical coordination. All units, this is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted. Enemy coordination is disrupted. Begin assault on designated positions according to plan sequence. Thompson led the first assault team down the northern slope with the methodical precision that Emma had emphasized during their tactical preparation, rather than the headlong charge that conventional doctrine might have suggested. His team moved with calculated efficiency that maximized their advantages while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. Emma monitored their progress while coordinating, supporting fires from multiple positions. Her analytical preparation was translating into tactical effectiveness as each element of her plan functioned according to the systematic thinking that had characterized her entire approach to military operations. Team 1 is in position for assault on Objective Alpha, Thompson reported. Enemy resistance is lighter than anticipated due to disruption of their command structure. Emma felt a surge of professional satisfaction as her tactical analysis proved accurate under combat conditions. The enemy's sophisticated defensive plan had depended on central coordination, and eliminating that coordination had reduced their effectiveness to individual fighting positions that could be defeated through systematic application of superior tactics. Lieutenant Chun coordinated electronic warfare operations from her position overlooking the valley, using her technical expertise to maintain Disruption of enemy communications while monitoring their attempts to re-establish tactical control. Ma'am, enemy forces are attempting to coordinate through backup communication systems, but I'm maintaining effective jamming across all frequencies. Emma appreciated Shen's technical capabilities, which provided crucial support for the tactical operations she was conducting. The combination of analytical planning, technical expertise, and aggressive execution was proving superior to the conventional approaches that her superiors had consistently favored. The second phase of the assault focused on the prepared defensive positions that had been preventing extraction of the Cedar Falls garrison. Emma had identified these positions during her initial tactical analysis, and her assault teams approached them using routes that exploited weaknesses in their defensive design. Team 2 moving on Objective Bravo, reported Corporal Anderson, leading a squad that had been specifically trained for close-quarters combat in fortified positions. Enemy position appears to be abandoned. They may have withdrawn when their command structure was eliminated. Emma monitored Anderson's approach while maintaining awareness of the overall tactical situation. Her assault was succeeding more completely than even her optimistic projections had suggested, indicating that her assessment of enemy capabilities and vulnerabilities had been remarkably accurate. Angel 7, this is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted to Walsh, who was providing aerial observation of the developing battle. Can you confirm enemy withdrawal from secondary positions? Walsh maneuvered her helicopter to observe the flanking positions that had been supporting the primary assault on Cedar Falls. Overwatch 6, I'm observing significant enemy movement away from prepared positions. It appears they're conducting tactical withdrawal rather than attempting to defend without coordination. Emma recognized the enemy withdrawal as confirmation that her tactical approach had been fundamentally sound. By disrupting their coordination rather than attempting direct assaults on prepared positions, she had forced them to abandon tactical advantages that conventional approaches would have attacked head-on. The third phase involved direct relief of the Cedar Falls garrison, which required careful coordination between Emma's assault forces and Mitchell's defensive positions. The tactical complexity of this operation would have challenged experienced commanders under ideal conditions, but Emma was managing it during her first independent combat command. Cedar Falls, this is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted to Mitchell's position. Enemy defensive positions are being neutralized systematically. Prepare for coordinated extraction in 15 minutes. Mitchell's response carried relief mixed with professional admiration. Overwatch 6, we're ready for extraction. Your tactical approach has been remarkable. The enemy withdrawal is allowing us to treat wounded and prepare for movement. Emma felt a moment of satisfaction that her tactical planning was enabling mission accomplishment with minimal casualties, exactly the kind of outcome that she had argued was possible throughout her career. The institutional assumption that effective military operations required accepting heavy losses was being disproven by systematic application of analytical thinking to complex tactical problems. As her assault teams consolidated their positions and prepared for the extraction phase, Emma received an unexpected radio transmission from Forward Operating Base Riverside. Overwatch 6, this is Base Command, Colonel Stevens transmitted, her voice carrying the strain of someone whose institutional assumptions were being challenged by operational realities. Reports from your area of operations indicate significant engagement with enemy forces. What is your current tactical status? Emma realized that her unauthorized expansion of mission parameters had been detected at higher headquarters, probably through communications monitoring or reports from Walsh's helicopter operations. She was now facing the institutional consequences of her tactical decisions, while simultaneously managing active combat operations. Base Command, this is Overwatch 6, Emma replied carefully. Enemy forces had established coordinated defensive positions that prevented extraction of Cedar Falls garrison using authorized tactical approaches. I implemented alternative methods to neutralize enemy coordination and create extraction opportunities. Stevens' response reflected the institutional tension between tactical success and procedural compliance. Overwatch 6, your current operations. Exceed authorized mission parameters. Explain your decision-making process. Emma found herself in the surreal position of defending her tactical decisions to higher headquarters, while coordinating complex combat operations in real time. The institutional culture that had consistently questioned her aggressive capabilities was now questioning her tactical judgment precisely when she was demonstrating exceptional combat leadership. Base command, tactical situation required immediate intervention to prevent loss of Cedar Falls garrison. Emma transmitted while monitoring her assault team's progress. Authorized approaches were tactically insufficient given enemy capabilities and positioning. Meanwhile, Thompson was coordinating the final assault on the remaining enemy positions that were still offering resistance to the extraction operation. His tactical reports provided Emma with real-time assessment of combat effectiveness while she managed institutional communications. "Ma'am, Objective Charlie is secured with minimal resistance," Thompson reported. Enemy forces appear to have been completely disrupted by elimination of their command structure. Your tactical assessment was absolutely accurate. Emma felt the cognitive dissonance of receiving praise for tactical effectiveness from her subordinates, while facing criticism for procedural violations from her superiors. The same analytical capabilities that were proving decisive in combat operations were being questioned by institutional leadership that valued compliance over competence. Lieutenant Shun provided additional intelligence that confirmed the success of Emma's unconventional approach. "Ma'am, intercepted enemy communications indicate complete breakdown of their tactical coordination. They're requesting withdrawal authorization from their higher headquarters." Emma realized that her tactical success was exceeding even her optimistic projections. The enemy force that had been positioned to inflict catastrophic casualties on any conventional rescue attempt was now conducting uncoordinated withdrawal under pressure from operations that had cost her forces minimal casualties. "All units. This is Overwatch 6, Emma transmitted as the extraction phase reached its critical moment. Begin coordinated extraction of Cedar Falls garrison. Maintain security while facilitating movement of wounded personnel." The extraction operation proceeded with the systematic efficiency that Emma had emphasized throughout her tactical planning. Her assault teams established security perimeters, while Mitchell's garrison moved wounded soldiers to evacuation positions. The complex coordination required for successful extraction was functioning exactly as her analytical preparation had anticipated. Walsh provided aerial coordination for medical evacuation helicopters that arrived to transport the most seriously wounded members of the Cedar Falls garrison. Overwatch 6, medical evacuation is proceeding on schedule. All wounded personnel will be airborne within 10 minutes. Emma monitored the medical evacuation while maintaining awareness of the tactical situation around Cedar Falls. Her forces had successfully disrupted enemy operations, rescued the trapped garrison, and created conditions for secure withdrawal without suffering the catastrophic casualties that conventional approaches would have produced. As the final phase of extraction operations commenced, Emma received another transmission from Colonel Stevens that indicated the institutional response to her tactical decisions was still developing. Overwatch 6, this is Base Command. You are directed to return to Forward Operating Base Riverside immediately upon completion of current operations. A formal debriefing will be conducted regarding your tactical decisions and their compliance with authorized mission parameters. Emma understood that her tactical success would be overshadowed by institutional concerns about procedural violations. The same analytical capabilities that had enabled her to save 12 American lives were being questioned by leadership that prioritized administrative compliance over operational effectiveness. Base Command understood. Emma replied. Extraction operations will be complete within 30 minutes. Thompson approached Emma's position as the tactical operation reached its successful conclusion. His expression reflected professional admiration, mixed with concern about the institutional consequences of her tactical decisions. "Ma'am, you've just conducted one of the most effective combat operations I've witnessed in 12 years of military service," Thompson said. "Your tactical analysis was perfect, your execution was flawless, and you saved the lives of every member of the Cedar Falls garrison." Emma appreciated Thompson's professional assessment, but she also understood that institutional evaluation would focus on different criteria. Her tactical success would be measured against procedural compliance rather than operational effectiveness, reflecting institutional values that she had encountered throughout her military career. As the convoy prepared for return movement to forward operating base Riverside, Emma reflected on the tactical operation she had just completed. Her analytical approach to military leadership had proven decisive under the most challenging circumstances, demonstrating that careful planning and systematic thinking could achieve superior results compared to conventional aggressive approaches. But she also knew that institutional culture would evaluate her performance based on compliance with established procedures rather than tactical effectiveness. The same hierarchical thinking that had consistently questioned her fitness for infantry leadership would now question her judgment in exceeding authorized mission parameters, regardless of the operational success she had achieved. The impossible test had been passed through a combination of analytical preparation, tactical innovation, and decisive leadership under extreme pressure. Emma Rodriguez had proven that the officer dismissed as too gentle for infantry operations could conduct complex combat operations more effectively than the aggressive leaders who had been favored by institutional culture. Whether that tactical success would translate into institutional recognition remained to be determined. But Emma knew that she had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every criticism of her leadership style throughout her military career. The debriefing room at Forward Operating Base Riverside felt electric with tension as Emma entered 3 hours after the successful completion of Operation Cedar Falls. The same conference table that had witnessed institutional skepticism about her tactical capabilities now hosted a gathering that would reshape her military career and challenge fundamental assumptions about infantry leadership. Colonel Stevens sat at the head of the table, flanked by Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Barnes from Division Headquarters and Brigadier General Robert Mitchell, who had arrived by helicopter specifically to investigate the unauthorized tactical operations that had resulted in complete mission success with 0 American casualties. Emma took her designated seat and arranged her after-action materials with the same methodical precision that had characterized her tactical planning. She was acutely aware that the next hour would determine whether her tactical success would be viewed as exceptional leadership or dangerous insubordination. "Major Rodriguez," General Mitchell began, using a rank that Emma hadn't yet been promoted to. "I want to understand exactly how you transformed what intelligence indicated would be a catastrophic tactical situation into the most successful rescue operation in this theater of operations." Emma felt a moment of confusion about the rank reference, but focused on Mitchell's question about her tactical decision-making process. "Sir, I utilized analytical assessment of enemy capabilities and terrain features to identify vulnerabilities in their defensive planning that conventional approaches wouldn't have exploited." Lieutenant Colonel Barnes opened a thick folder containing communications transcripts, tactical analyses, and intelligence reports that had been compiled during and after Emma's operation. "Major, your tactical innovations during Operation Cedar Falls have been reviewed by the Army's Combat Studies Institute. They're describing your approach as a paradigm shift in small unit tactical thinking." Emma struggled to process the institutional reversal that was occurring around her. The same analytical methods that had been criticized as evidence of insufficient aggressiveness were now being praised as revolutionary tactical innovations by the highest levels of military leadership. Sir, I simply applied systematic analysis to identify solutions that achieved mission objectives while minimizing casualties, Emma replied. The techniques I used are logical extensions of established tactical principles. General Mitchell smiled with the expression of someone who had discovered unexpected capabilities within his command structure. Major, what you describe as logical extensions represent fundamental innovations in how we approach complex tactical problems. Your operation succeeded where conventional doctrine would have failed catastrophically. Colonel Stevens, who had consistently questioned Emma's fitness for infantry leadership, now faced the professional challenge of acknowledging that her institutional assessments had been fundamentally wrong. Major Rodriguez, I need to formally apologize for my previous evaluations of your tactical capabilities. Your performance during Operation Cedar Falls demonstrates that I failed to recognize exceptional leadership qualities. The apology carried significant professional implications beyond personal recognition. Stevens was acknowledging that institutional biases had prevented proper utilization of tactical expertise that could have saved lives and improved mission effectiveness throughout Emma's career. Ma'am, I appreciate your honesty, Emma replied carefully. The institutional culture that shaped those evaluations affects many officers whose capabilities don't fit traditional leadership models. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes pulled out additional documents that indicated the scope of institutional changes that Emma's tactical success had initiated. Major, the Secretary of the Army has ordered a comprehensive review of how we identify and develop tactical leadership at all levels of the organization. Your operation at Cedar Falls is being used as the foundation for new doctrine development. Emma felt overwhelmed by the dramatic transformation in her professional status. 24 hours earlier, she had been facing potential court-martial for exceeding authorized mission parameters. Now she was being recognized as the architect of tactical innovations that would influence Army doctrine for decades. Sir, what specific changes are being implemented? Emma asked. General Mitchell consulted his own materials before responding. Major, we're establishing new career paths for officers whose expertise emphasizes analytical thinking and tactical innovation over conventional aggressive leadership. Additionally, we're modifying operational planning processes to incorporate diverse perspectives rather than relying exclusively on traditional approaches. The changes represented exactly the kind of institutional reform that Emma had hoped to achieve throughout her military career, but she had never imagined that her individual actions could catalyze such comprehensive organizational transformation. Captain Derek Mason entered the debriefing room with obvious reluctance, his previous confidence replaced by the uncomfortable recognition that his institutional assumptions had been proven wrong by operational reality. His presence indicated that the institutional reversal extended beyond senior leadership to include peers who had consistently dismissed Emma's capabilities. Major Rodriguez, Mason said, his voice carrying the humility that contrasted sharply with his previous arrogance. I owe you a professional apology and probably my career. Your tactical methods saved lives that my preferred approaches would have wasted through aggressive incompetence. Emma studied Mason's expression, recognizing the difficulty of acknowledging institutional blind spots that had shaped his entire professional identity. His apology represented broader cultural changes that would affect how the military evaluated tactical thinking and leadership effectiveness. Captain, we all learned something important about the relationship between analytical thinking and combat effectiveness, Emma replied diplomatically. The institution benefits when we value competence over conformity. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes presented Emma with official orders that formalized her promotion and new assignment responsibilities. Major, you're being promoted to major with immediate effect and assigned to the Pentagon to lead a new task force on adaptive tactical leadership. Your experience at Cedar Falls will be used to develop training programs for future infantry officers. Emma, read through the promotion orders while processing the implications of her new assignment. The Pentagon position would provide opportunities to influence military culture at the institutional level, ensuring that other officers wouldn't face the same barriers to professional advancement that had shaped her career. Ma'am, I'm honored by the confidence you're showing, but I want to ensure that this assignment includes opportunities for continued operational experience, Emma said. Effective teaching requires ongoing practical application. General Mitchell nodded approvingly. Major, your new position includes regular consultation with combat units, participation in major training exercises, and development of new tactical procedures. We want you to remain an operational practitioner, not become an academic theorist. Sergeant Thompson entered the debriefing room carrying additional after-action materials from the soldiers who had participated in Operation Cedar Falls. His presence indicated that the institutional recognition extended to enlisted perspectives on Emma's leadership effectiveness. Sir, Thompson addressed General Mitchell, the soldiers who participated in Major Rodriguez's operation have requested permission to provide formal statements about her tactical leadership. They wanted on record that her analytical approach was superior to any conventional methods they've experienced. Emma felt gratified that her soldiers were advocating for her leadership methods, but she also recognized that their support validated approaches to military leadership that the institution had consistently undervalued. General Mitchell consulted with Lieutenant Colonel Barnes before responding to Thompson's request. Sergeant, we'll be conducting comprehensive interviews with all personnel involved in Operation Cedar Falls. Their perspectives will be incorporated into the doctrine development process. As the formal debriefing concluded, Emma reflected on the institutional transformation that had occurred around her tactical success. The officer who had been dismissed as too gentle for infantry operations was now being recognized as an innovative tactical leader whose methods would influence military education and operational planning throughout the Army. 2 years later, Major Emma Rodriguez stood before an auditorium filled with senior military leaders from across the United States Army at the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. The lecture hall buzzed with the energy of officers who were grappling with fundamental changes in how the military approached tactical leadership and operational planning. Behind Emma, large screens displayed tactical analysis from Operation Cedar Falls alongside comparative studies, showing how analytical approaches to military problems had consistently outperformed conventional aggressive methods across multiple conflict environments. The data represented a comprehensive validation of the leadership philosophy that had once been dismissed as unsuitable for infantry operations. Leadership effectiveness, Emma began, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone whose methods had been tested under the most extreme circumstances, cannot be measured by adherence to traditional models. It must be evaluated based on mission accomplishment, soldier welfare, and adaptation to complex operational environments. In the front row sat General Patricia Harrison, who had recently been appointed as the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, and Colonel James Walsh, the new Director of Tactical Innovation, who had been instrumental in implementing the institutional changes that followed Emma's tactical success at Cedar Falls. Emma advanced to her next presentation slide, which showed casualty statistics comparing operations that utilized analytical planning methods against those that relied on conventional aggressive approaches. Over the past 18 months, units that have implemented analytical tactical methods have achieved mission success rates that exceed traditional approaches by 37%, while reducing casualties by 52%. Captain Jennifer Chun, who had been promoted following her exceptional performance during Operation Cedar Falls, raised her hand from the audience. Ma'am, how do we ensure that these analytical methods are properly integrated into existing military culture rather than being treated as specialized techniques for unusual situations? Emma had anticipated this question because it addressed The fundamental challenge of institutional change within traditional military organizations. Captain, integration requires demonstrating that analytical thinking enhances rather than replaces traditional military virtues like courage, decisiveness, and tactical competence. The goal is evolution, not revolution. The question reflected broader concerns within the military about maintaining institutional identity while adapting to operational realities that demanded more sophisticated approaches to tactical thinking. Emma's response emphasized continuity with established values while expanding definitions of effective leadership. Lieutenant Colonel Derek Mason, who had undergone his own professional transformation following the events at Cedar Falls, contributed his perspective from the audience. Major Rodriguez, how do we identify officers who possess these analytical capabilities but may not fit traditional leadership models? Emma appreciated Mason's evolution from skeptic to advocate for diversified leadership approaches. His question indicated genuine commitment to institutional change rather than superficial compliance with new policies. Sir, we expand our evaluation criteria to include problem-solving capabilities, pattern recognition, and adaptive thinking under pressure, Emma replied. Traditional measures of leadership effectiveness remain important, but they shouldn't be the exclusive criteria for identifying tactical potential. General Harrison stood to address the audience directly, her presence indicating the institutional significance of the changes that Emma's tactical success had initiated. Major Rodriguez's experience demonstrates that military effectiveness depends on utilizing the full spectrum of available talent rather than conforming to narrow definitions of leadership capability. Emma felt professional satisfaction that her individual tactical success had catalyzed institutional changes that would benefit countless other officers whose capabilities had been undervalued by traditional military culture. The transformation extended beyond her personal career to influence how the Army identified, developed, and utilized tactical expertise. Following the formal presentation, Emma met with a smaller group of junior officers who were implementing analytical tactical methods in their own units. The conversation took place in one of the college's seminar rooms, where future military leaders learned to grapple with the complexities of modern operational environments. Major Rodriguez, began Lieutenant Michael Park, a young infantry officer whose analytical capabilities had been recognized through the new evaluation protocols. How do we maintain confidence in our methods when we encounter resistance from officers who prefer traditional approaches? Emma recognized Park's concern as reflecting ongoing cultural tensions within the military between innovation and tradition. Lieutenant, institutional change is incremental. Focus on demonstrating effectiveness rather than arguing theoretical superiority. Results convince skeptics more effectively than explanations. Captain Lisa Thompson, who had been assigned to develop new training curricula based on Emma's tactical methods, contributed her perspective on implementation challenges. Ma'am, we're finding that analytical approaches require more intensive preparation and training than conventional methods. How do we balance thoroughness with operational tempo requirements? Emma had encountered similar challenges throughout her career and developed practical solutions that addressed Thompson's concerns. Captain, analytical preparation accelerates rather than slows tactical decision-making once officers become proficient with the methods. The initial training investment produces long-term efficiency gains. The discussion continued for another hour, covering topics from tactical innovation to institutional leadership during periods of organizational change. Emma was impressed by the sophistication of questions from junior officers who were implementing new approaches to military problems throughout the Army. As the session concluded, Colonel Walsh approached Emma with an unexpected proposal that would further expand her influence on military education and doctrine development. Major, the Secretary of Defense has requested that you lead a joint service task force on adaptive military leadership. The assignment would involve all service branches and focus on preparing military leaders for increasingly complex operational environments. Emma felt excitement about the opportunity to influence military culture beyond the Army, while also recognizing the broader implications of her expanding responsibilities. "Sir, I'm honored by the confidence, but I want to ensure that the assignment includes regular operational experience to maintain practical relevance." Walsh smiled at Emma's consistent emphasis on operational credibility. "Major, the position includes quarterly deployments with operational units and participation in major joint exercises. We've learned that effective doctrine development requires ongoing practical application." As Emma prepared to leave Fort Leavenworth, she reflected on the institutional journey that had transformed her, from marginalized logistics officer to influential military educator and tactical innovator. The path had been neither predictable nor comfortable, shaped by moments of crisis that had revealed capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. The drive back to Washington took her through rural Kansas, where agricultural landscapes stretched endlessly under vast skies that reminded her of the broader American society that the military served. As she passed small towns and farming communities, Emma thought about the responsibility that came with the institutional influence she had acquired. Her story had become part of military folklore, taught in leadership classes and discussed in professional development programs throughout the Army. But more importantly, it had become the foundation for cultural changes that recognized strength in forms that military tradition had previously failed to understand or value. Emma Rodriguez had proven that the officer dismissed as too gentle for infantry operations could conduct complex tactical operations more effectively than aggressive leaders who conformed to traditional models. She had demonstrated that analytical thinking enhanced rather than replaced traditional military virtues, and that institutional effectiveness depended on utilizing diverse perspectives rather than conforming to narrow definitions of leadership. Capability. The bridge she had held at Cedar Falls had been defended for a few critical hours, but the principles it represented would influence military operations for decades to come. Emma had built a different kind of bridge, one that connected traditional military values with adaptive leadership capabilities needed for future conflicts. That bridge would carry countless other officers across the gap between exclusion and opportunity, between being underestimated and being recognized for their true capabilities. As the sun set over the American heartland, Major Emma Rodriguez continued her journey toward the next phase of her career, carrying with her the knowledge that sometimes the most important victories were won not through force of arms, but through the patient work of proving that strength could take many forms, and that the greatest warriors were often those who fought hardest to preserve the lives they were sworn to protect. The gentle officer who had been dismissed as unsuitable for infantry command had become the architect of tactical innovations that would shape military leadership for generations, proving that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most revolutionary ideas, and that institutional transformation often begins with individuals who refuse to accept that effective leadership comes in only one form. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.